Well, thank you, Greg, and thank you all so much for allowing me to share a bit of this holiest of days this Easter Sunday with all of you. Let me begin by saying Dada Nastada, Ambawa Stitch, Buju Tanshi, Oki Nitsgwa. I just managed to ruin many Indigenous languages in under 15 seconds, but it's that simple Indigenous greeting. Greetings to all my relations. And I like to start with that simple thought that we are indeed all related, that we are all linked together in community. And we stand today, of course, on very ancient lands. We stand on lands where, for thousands of years, people have been coming to this place, to this spot called Mokinstis, the elbow, the place where two rivers meet. They've been coming here to hunt and fish, to live, to love, to fight sometimes, to have great victories, to taste bitter disappointment, but mostly to build community. And in these dark times for this world, I'm comforted to remember that the original inhabitants of this land, the Nitsitapi, the people, we call them the Blackfoot people now, have always generously shared this land with others. Whether the Beaver people of the Tsuut'ina Nation, the Stoney people of the Nakota Nations, the Métis people with whom we walk hand in hand, or for the last 150 years or so, people from every corner of this broken earth, coming here to this place of safety, of sanctuary, of welcome, and above all, of opportunity. And when I say that, I'm describing our whole community, but I may well be describing Knox as an important part of that community. This congregation has been here as long as there's been a Calgary. 20 years ago, I was here as part of the wedding party of one of my very good friends' weddings. It was, I think, my first time here, and I noticed the family is here today. 10 years or so ago, one could argue that my political career started in the basement of this building, as all good things start in church basements, when we brought together a group of people to talk about the future of Calgary and the future of our community, and to vision and to think and to dream about who we wanted to be. And I'm thrilled to see that Knox continues to do this great work in placemaking, opening the space of sanctuary and of contemplation as a community space for everyone. Now, I have to tell you, I spend a lot of my time, for obvious reasons, with different faith communities. I spend a lot of my time in synagogues and churches and mosques and gurdwaras and temples and mandirs, but I've never done it on Easter before. And I have to tell you that as a Muslim man with his own icon now, speaking here on Easter, I am super nervous. I don't usually get super nervous, but I am super nervous. But I'm deeply honored as well to be here with you on the most holy of days. And I've been thinking about why this is so meaningful to me. Some years ago, I had the opportunity to stand in the pulpit at a different United Church on Palm Sunday, a week ago. And I think about this week, and how this week starts with Jesus entering the city, to hosannas and palm fronds. It starts with hope. It goes through unimaginable pain and unimaginable sorrow, and culminates today in this day of joy, in this day of resurrection, in this day of life. It's the story of humanity, isn't it? And everything that we go through as human beings. It's about joy, but it's about pain. It's about light, but it's about darkness. It's about hope, but it's about despair. But ultimately, it's about understanding what it means to be a human being and what it means to be a person of faith. You know, I don't want to stretch the metaphor too far, but I'm a politician, so I will, because we're not that bright. But, you know, when Greg introduced me, he talked about how I wear purple every day. I was thinking about the fact that purple is, of course, the color of the Lenten season. It's the color of Easter. And I was thinking about that a little bit and thinking about the reason that I wear purple every day, which, by the way, nobody ever gets except for children. Children always understand it. When they say, is purple your favorite color? I say, well, there's actually a reason I wear it beyond it being my favorite color. Well, it is now anyway, considering everything I own has some in it. And the kids always get it. And they understand that purple is not, of course, a primary color, it's a secondary color. It's a mix of red and blue. And that is a political statement, certainly, but I think that it's also a statement about community. And in these times of division, in these times where people seem to be pulling apart, I think it's important for us to remember what it means to be together. And as people of faith, it's important for us to remember that there is so much more that unites us than that which divides us. I'm going to read you a little verse from Scripture. This is the verse. And remember, we took a covenant from the children of Israel. Worship none but God. Treat with kindness your parents and your kindred, and orphans and those in need. Speak fairly to the people. Be steadfast in prayer. Practice regular charity. Now, some of you are looking at me going, is that Old Testament or New Testament? What verse is that? It's the Holy Quran, Surah 2, Ayat 83. And I raise that with you today to remind us of what unifies us. What unifies not just the Abrahamic faiths, but what unifies all of us as people of faith. A deep understanding of the dignity of every human being, of the necessity of service, of the need to keep it better than we found it. The power of belief that we can make our community and our world better. And oh boy, how the world could be better right now. I spend a lot of my time thinking about big things. And these days, there's a lot of big things to think about. A world that feels torn apart at the seams. I think of Yeats. The center cannot hold. The falcon cannot hear the falconer. I think of how the voices of intolerance and division, of hatred and racism, of Islamophobia and anti-Semitism and religious discrimination and bigotry of all kinds are growing louder and louder and louder. It feels like the forces that would divide us are prevailing over the forces that would bring us together. It feels like the world is tearing apart at the seams. It's a world that needs us as people of faith now more than ever. And I think we are compelled as people of faith to think about what our own role is in this world, what our own role is in preserving a role of opportunity, a role of welcome, a world of sanction for everyone. And at Easter, the joy of Easter, the joy of the chocolate egg, is made all that much sweeter when compared to the pain and sorrow of suffering that has just passed. In a world that feels so very dark. You know, Greg quoted the moderator of the United Church at the very top of this, and Jordan Cantwell's quotation, his Easter quotation this year, is, I think, well worth reflecting upon. And I'm going to read it again. To be an Easter people is to be those who embody that fierce, unrelenting love that says to the forces of death and hate that continue to operate today, God is a God of love and life, and we will be a people of love and life. I talk about this country a lot. I am an incredibly proud Canadian. This country lives in my bloodstream and is in my very heart. But we're not a perfect place. We are a place of great injustice. We are the place of the Kamagatu Maru and of the Chinese head tax. We are the place that had Japanese internment camps, We're the place that created and nurtured residential schools. We're a place where the promise of our community, that promise of safety, of sanctuary, and of opportunity is not yet passed on to everyone within our community. But I would rather be having those conversations here than anywhere else. I would rather be talking in community about how we can be better, how we acknowledge our past, and how we affirm our future in this place than anywhere else. When we had this terrible act of terror in a place of worship in Quebec City, I think it's fair to say that our nation was shaken to our very core, because we learned and understood and remembered that hate exists here, that we are not somehow immune, that we are not somehow safe in this place. And I was shaken at those shootings at a mosque as people were finishing their Sunday prayers. I was shaken not as a Muslim. I was shaken as a Muslim. But I was also shaken because I'm a human being and because I'm a Canadian. And we're defined in this place not by the fact that hatred exists here, as it does everywhere, but we're defined by how we respond to it, by our very, very human response, by our ability to come together and ease each other's suffering. I spent most of that week after the Quebec City shootings with people of different faiths, at multi-faith events in mosques and churches, and then at City Hall in the municipal building, what I call Calgary's living room, at a ceremony marking UN World Interfaith Harmony Week. I had to look down because the UN uses lots of nouns and they don't always go in any order that makes sense. World Interfaith Harmony Week, there we go. And it was supposed to be a celebratory event. But because of what had just happened in Quebec, it became much, much more solemn. And the people sitting and standing in Calgary's living room in the atrium of our City Hall were Baha'i and Buddhist and Christian and Hindu and Jewish and Muslim and Sikh and people of no religion, talking about looking after one another. And I remembered that the night before I had been at a big mosque which was packed to the rafters for an interfaith vigil. And a young rabbi stood up, and he spoke very, very, very simply. And all he said was, "To my Muslim brothers and sisters, know that the Jewish community is here for you. Know that we will always be here for you." And then he sat down. And he sat down next to a friend of mine who is a leader in the Muslim community, and the two of them put their arms around each other, and they sat in the front row. And all I could think as I was looking at them was, well, they have the exact same beard. United in hipsterdom. But I've been spending a lot of time as I have been in all these faith communities thinking about my own faith and thinking about how I am called and how we are all called to make this world a better place. I've been thinking of that Jewish tradition, that Jewish tenet, tikkun olam, heal the world. We are all called to heal the world in our own way. But I've been reflecting in my own spiritual practice, interestingly, on a Christian prayer, the Franciscan Prayer, attributed to St. Francis, though I checked the etymology and it came much after St. Francis. Maybe you know it. If you know it, say it with me. But if not, let's invoke that prayer in this sacred place today. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. Where there is sadness, joy. O divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive, it is in pardoning that we are pardoned, it is in dying that we are born to eternal life. Couldn't be better for Easter, could it? for us to think about that duality: darkness, light, despair, hope, doubt, faith, injury, pardon, sadness, joy. The reality of what it means to be human. And I've been reflecting on that in my own spiritual practice a lot. But I've also been thinking about, what does that mean to me? What does that mean that I am called to do? What does that mean that every single one of us is called to do? As everyday people, with our everyday hands, our everyday hearts, our everyday voices, our everyday souls. What is it that we are called to do? And I would suggest that it's not enough for us to think with faith and hope and light and joy and pardon and love. But we must also act with these things as well. We must take action. We must take action to heal our community and action to make our community stronger. Action that brings us together. When we think about Easter, we think about sacrifice. And hopefully none of us will be called upon to sacrifice our lives. This icon is making me very nervous. But the question is, what are we called to sacrifice? Our wealth, our reasonableness, our ability, our autonomy, our individuality? What do we sacrifice in order to build community for others? To ensure that we are continuing to fight for the rights of every other person in this community? How do we do it? From simple things like meeting your neighbors, to hosting a community potluck, to working with newcomers and refugees and immigrants in our community, to volunteer for events that celebrate who we are as a diverse and multicultural and pluralistic nation, to help create more open public spaces to bring people together, to come together. It's what we do every day, and it's what we have great capacity to do in this city and in this organization. I'm going to speak politically for a minute, if I may. During the federal election, a year and a half ago, when our MLA became our member of parliament and later became the minister, you may recall that there was a photo that came out September the 4th, 2015. A photo that I hope started to change the world, but I'm not sure it did. It was the picture of young Alan Kurdi, a 4-year-old boy whose body was washed up on a Mediterranean beach. And that photo hit Canadians, I think, harder than anyone else, because it quickly became apparent that Alan Kurdi's family, his aunt, was in Vancouver. And they had been trying hard to figure out how to get that family here to safety, to sanctuary, to welcome, and to opportunity. And when Canadians, regardless of political stripes, saw that photo, I think all of us felt a profound sense of failure. That we had failed as a nation, that we had failed as a people. That we had failed because the very day that that photo came out should have been that child's first day of kindergarten in Vancouver. And unlike everywhere else in the world, the conversation changed in a very different way. And suddenly the conversation became about the most Canadian of questions. What can we do? How can we help? And as you know, the election changed. It became actually almost a bit unseemly, with each party promising to bring more and more and more refugees. And of course, the party that won promised to bring the most, 25,000 by Christmas. We did it by February. And we were having this conversation about what it meant to be Canadian, and I was really heartened by it. And then the election happened, and then the awful, horrific shootings in Paris happened. And the dialogue hardened. It became difficult and harsh. And in the middle of all of that, we were having an open house to discuss Calgary's response to the refugee situation. And I got to tell you, I was a bit scared to go because I didn't know who was going to show up. I didn't know what they were going to say. I didn't know how it was going to change our conversation in the community and our fragile covenant together in terms of what we were going to look for and how we were going to look after these people. But I had to go. I'm the mayor. So I walked out of my office and I crossed the street to the John Dutton Theatre at the Calgary Public Library. And the place was packed to the rafters. I've never seen it so full. And it was full of priests and imams and rabbis. It was full of grandmas and kids who should have been in school. It was full of that very unique species of individual without whom nothing gets done in our community, who can only be described as church ladies. And everybody was asking only that one question, that most Canadian of questions. How can I help? And I stood there at the bottom of the theater, and a woman at the very top of the theater stood up and said, "Mayor, I've got a question." And I said, "Okay." And she said, "Mayor, I come from the Siksika Nation. I am a proud First Nations woman." And I thought to myself, oh boy. I know exactly what she's going to say. She's going to say, why are we spending so much time and effort on these newcomers when we have so many problems of our own? When we have the issues of our murdered and missing Indigenous sisters, when we have people in this country who don't have clean water, where we have people in this country who are living in substandard housing in a place of such great prosperity, how can we possibly spend our time on these newcomers? So I knew she was going to say it, and I had an answer, but I wasn't really looking forward to the conversation. What she actually said was, "Mayor, I've got a problem." And I said, "What's your problem?" And she said, "Well, I've made a lot of phone calls, sent a lot of emails, and I have managed to track down enough elders who have the right regalia, and I've managed to find enough young fellows who are willing to do the drumming, but I don't know when these families are coming." And I looked at her and I said, "I have no idea what you're talking about." And she looked at me and she rolled her eyes, as people often do to me, and started to explain it to me like I'm a 6-year-old, which people often do to me. And she said, "Your worship." And when they start with "your worship," I know I'm about to get it. She said, "Your worship. These people have been through pain that we cannot imagine. They've been through trauma and violence that are unthinkable to us. It is unbelievably important that when they come here to start their new lives on this land, that we welcome them with the proper ritual and the proper ceremony, and that we make sure that we cleanse them of their past and give them an opportunity to live a life of dignity here." So we did. A month or two later, we had an event that we put together in record time, thanks to my colleagues at the City of Calgary, to welcome 1,000 new people to our community. It was a beautiful event. There was a fair of resources and services from the Calgary Zoo to Calgary Transit. Everyone in the city, I feel like, who spoke Arabic came to do translations. And I stood there on the stage with a traditional knowledge keeper and elder from the Nitsitapi, from the Blackfoot community, smudging everyone in and doing a welcoming ceremony. There was drumming, and there was regalia, and there were people in the audience, 2 people who were holding up handwritten signs, big burly Arab guys, right? And they're holding up signs, handwritten, and one of them said, "Thank you, Canada." And the other one said, "Thank you, Calgary." That's the power. That's the power that we have as individuals, not just to change our community, but to change the world. Greg took a bit of my thunder because he talked a little bit about my sesquicentennial project, my Canada 150 project that I hope that all of you are going to share with me. And it's kind of a crazy dream, but I want to share with you my project. Actually, I have two sesquicentennial projects for Canada's 150th anniversary. My first sesquicentennial project is I want to be able to say the word sesquicentennial as much as possible, because it is super fun to say. So given that you're stuck in these very uncomfortable pews, something's never changed in any place of worship, I want you to say it with me on three and incorporate it into your vocabulary. So on three, sesquicentennial. 1, 2, 3. Are they always that quiet?
Yeah, wake them up.
Let's try that again. On three, 1, 2, 3. Sesquicentennial. Isn't that awesome? Just made your whole Easter, didn't it? Even better than the chocolate eggs that are coming. Et pour ceux qui parlent français comme toujours, c'est plus fun en français. Et le mot en français, c'est sesquicentenaire. Sesquicentenaire. It sounds both delicious and dangerous all at the same time. My real sesquicentennial project, my real sesquicentennial dream, is the reason I wear this number 3 every day. People always say, does it stand for term 3 for Mayor Nenshi? No, it does not. October 16th. What it actually stands for is my call to Canadians from coast to coast to coast to consider this year, every single one of us, to give an anniversary gift to the nation. And that anniversary gift is 3 acts of community service. 3 things for Canada, we're calling it. 3 gestes pour le Canada. And they can be small things. Mow your neighbor's lawn. They can be big things. Join the board of Knox United. I understand next week is the exciting annual general meeting with the audited financial statements. This is fun stuff. It doesn't matter if they're big things or small things. It's about everyday people using our everyday hands and our everyday voices and our everyday hearts to make extraordinary change. And just imagine if I'm successful in this crazy dream. That's 100 million acts of service this year and every year. And in this broken world of ours, in this terrifying world of ours, what a message that would be from Canada. To say, to celebrate our important birthday, we have decided that the future of humanity is about community, and the future of community is about service. That's our chance. It's our chance to change the world. You know, in this sacred time, we're spending a lot of time reflecting on the past and hoping and dreaming about the future and committing in what we can do to add to this story of Mokinstis. And you know, it's become almost fashionable in this cold, hard world that we find ourselves in to denigrate those of us who speak out for compassion and kindness and mercy and love. Sometimes they say those of us who speak out for these things are somehow weak. Sometimes they call us fragile snowflakes. You know what? I run the snow removal system here in Calgary. And one thing that I know for sure is that enough fragile snowflakes put together are the most powerful force in the world. So never, 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 never make that mistake. Never, never mistake kindness and compassion and mercy and love for weakness. It is not weakness. It is strength. It is strength beyond the imagining of the small-minded and of the intolerant. It is the strength upon which we must draw every single day to make sure that we are looking after one another in this community, that we are looking after our fellow human beings everywhere in this world. Because that, my friends, is the basic promise of our community. The promise that it doesn't matter where you come from or what you look like. It doesn't matter how you worship or whom you love. It doesn't matter what your level of ability is. Every single one of us, in every single corner of this community, has the right to safety, to sanctuary, to welcome, to opportunity, to shared prosperity. Every single one of us has the opportunity right here, right now, to live a great Canadian life. I get to work on that every single day. It is the great honor of my life. But guess what? All of us get to work on that every single day. And in this time of resurrection, in this day of great joy, let us all recommit ourselves to working on that promise every single day, to build that place of safety, of sanctuary, of welcome, and of the opportunity for every one of us to live that great Canadian life. Thank you all.